is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Robert Graves bringing you another episode of Year of the Vet. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. If you're tuning in as a repeat customer, thank you for just continuing to trust me with bringing you quality information, quality people to listen to, and just a good time. Hopefully you're having a good time with these podcasts, and hopefully I'm able to bring you individuals who are enlightening you in a way, or giving you information that you never had, or maybe giving you different ways to think about stuff. But the purpose of Year of the Vet is to bring you individuals that are able to give you a different insight on transition from a variety of different people's lives. Because transition isn't the same for everybody. Transition is absolutely genuine to you and you alone. But we all do experience a lot of the same things. For instance, buying a house, or having to land your first job, learning about what a resume is and how to write one, dealing with friends and family on the outside that haven't seen you in 4 to 20 years. There's just a lot of things that are new to us, and it's not embarrassing. It's nothing to be ashamed about. And so I'm bringing you individuals that can speak on that. One thing I do want to ask as an action item is, don't forget to tell people about Year of the Vet. Don't forget to go to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and subscribe. I actually just opened up all new stuff for Year of the Vet specifically to detach it from the book. So go to Year of the Vet on Twitter, Instagram, go to the Facebook page, like, subscribe. Get to iTunes if you have iTunes. If you're using Spreaker or any other platform that you listen to podcasts with, get there, subscribe, write a comment, but most importantly, share the information, share the knowledge, and let people know that Year of the Vet is here for them. Today we have Leland Schulz, who was a captain in the Marine Corps. Leland was a combat engineer, and the reason he joined the Navy Academy was because of Top Gun, but he never made it into the Flight Academy. However, he took what was given to him and he rolled with it, and he served his time. He loves his time, serving 7 years in the Corps and 4 tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He's had a lot of time to really learn who he is, and he brings that to the conversation today. This is my moment to be able to actually talk about officer stuff, because I don't have a lot of officers on the program, but there's questions that I asked pertaining specifically to officers. And then if you look at the show notes, I'll include a screenshot of a topic that we have later on in the episode that revolves around the separation of enlisted versus officer in the civilian side. And since he's in a semi-type of managerial role where he's able to hire individuals, if he feels that this screenshot, and I urge you to look at it, is accurate in the civilian world. We talk about things that I've written in the book, How to Grow a Beard, a military transition guide back into civilian life. Things like using recruiting companies like Lucas Group, Bradley Morris, or Orion, using LinkedIn. But more importantly, he talks about taking chances on opportunities in relation to employment, or, what do you do after you've lived your dream, the dream of being a Marine? He talks about understanding your role in society and being able to use what you have out of the service and make the demands that you're looking for in your new life, your new job, your new employment, your new relationships, the new you. But the mindset is that you have a right to get a feel where you want to work. You don't have to get that first job. You don't have to jump on the second job. And realistically, there are services out there and organizations out there and people out there that will help you not have to live in the streets and under a bridge. And Leland kind of touches on it and makes light of the situation. But, veteran homelessness and veteran unemployment is at an astronomically high rate, and we need to make sure that we're helping each other get on our feet. And so that's why this conversation is being had. Leland's not huge in the social media mindset, but I will put his email in the show notes in case you want to reach out to him. And if I can wrap up this conversation into one word, how I would describe the conversation I had with Leland, that one word would be insightful. So I really hope that you're able to just enjoy the conversation as it's meant to be, a conversation. And I'm going to kick off the conversation with one thought that he says that I really want you to hold on to. Failure is always better than regret. think about that. But first, enjoy this conversation. Leland, it's a pleasure to have you on Year of the Vet. Thank you so much for just agreeing to be a part of this.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time to bring me on. So thank you.
No worries. It's cool because I love having fellow Devil Dogs on, but the difference between you and the other Devil Dogs I've had on is that you are a commissioned officer of 7 years in the Marine Corps. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep, absolutely.
So I'm going to ask, how did you get to that? Who's the pre-commissioned officer, Leland?
Well, so I guess pre-commissioned officer Leland lived in Lake Arrowhead. Went to Rim of the World High School with a certain Arlene Graves, actually. We're in the same class.
Shout out to my wife.
And then, yeah, shout out. And then, I was, I had an interest, from the beginning of high school in going into the military, and actually specifically going to the Naval Academy. I think I watched Top Gun once many times.
So it wasn't a family thing?
So I didn't really know my grandfather. My grandfather was a Marine who served in the Pacific. But I really did not know him at all. So,
Gotcha.
It was more just kind of an internally driven thing, right?
Yeah.
So I say Top Gun. Actually, I was probably watching too much Star Wars. For whatever reason, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So I decided I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. So I focused a lot of my efforts on that in high school. I was, wrestled. I was part of the varsity wrestling team, like an honor student, all that other stuff. And I think that probably sums up high school pretty well.
So it's safe to say you were like a straight edge student and child growing up.
I guess I still have some of the best. Some of my best friends are still guys I met in high school. I don't live too far from Arrowhead now, so there are a couple guys who I'd still consider my best friends. I'm actually dating a girl that I knew in high school. We haven't been dating since high school, but she was also in our class. So, but no, I guess I didn't get in enough trouble to keep me out of the academy at any point in time. So I guess there's that.
So when did you leave? Okay, I guess you left high school, and then what happened? You went to college right away?
Yeah. So the way the Naval Academy starts, it starts during the summer. So I think like 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I went out there and started my plebe summer. So that would have been 2003. Then went through the academy. I majored in ocean engineering, which is a subset of mechanical engineering, and played a little bit of rugby. I did some other kind of extracurricular stuff. Went to airborne school. I was there. Probably partied more than I should have. So my academy resume is not particularly impressive. Pretty low GPA and not a lot of extracurricular activities. But I made it through, so that was good. And then I'm not sure how much you know about the way they kind of select Marines coming out of the Naval Academy, but
I don't.
You compete. Everything's a competition, right? Figuring out what your service is going to be. So you compete your whole time in the academy, and then you rank your choices coming out. So obviously, Marine was my first choice, and there's some other training stuff. There's this thing called Devil Dog during the summer where you go for I think a month or so, and they have you do all these field ops and obstacle course and everything just to kind of see where you stack up. And then about somewhere between 15 or 20% of the class gets selected to go into the Marine Corps, and then you go from there to TBS. And then TBS is 6 months long. It's the basic school, kind of where they teach everyone to be an infantry platoon commander, kind of in the basic sense, right?
Yeah.
And then when you're there, you're competing for whatever your MOS is going to be on the back end. So I ended up leaving TBS selected to be a combat engineer, so 1302. And then went to combat engineer school from there, which was about 3 months. And then I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed lieutenant hitting the fleet. So I'm sure if you've had other Marines on the show before, I'm sure you guys all have opinions about lieutenants. Just for your edification, it's not much fun being on the lieutenant side when you do hit the fleet, because you already know that like everybody's got those opinions of you, that they kind of expect you to already
Did they prep you?
Know absolutely nothing.
Did they prep you for that?
Oh yeah, that's like a major theme throughout both TBS and your MOS school. So when you get to MOS school, I mean, it's like almost all gunnery sergeants teaching you. So they're constantly just bagging on you about how little you know.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man, I'm like in your class right now. Like, teach me, man. Like, don't send me out there not knowing anything. Then, and at TBS, it's a very common theme of basically that, you have to earn the right to lead, and which is absolutely true. But it's definitely, hit upon quite a bit that's something that you have to earn, and that's not going to be there when you first get there, that respect. So
yeah. Do you think that it's psychologically harder for officers to lead Marines, especially if they haven't had a leadership role? Like, what do you think the difference is? Because, I mean, I spent 10 years in, so my perception on officers is different than somebody who's been in just one term, right? I had a lot more like bonding time, and I got to know the process and where these gentlemen and ladies were coming from, but I could kind of tell there was a little extra added stress and pressure because they are Marine officers.
Right.
Did you experience that? Is that a common thing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of pressure on your back, and especially getting commissioned at a time of war when the potentially people's lives are going to be in your hands, and there does and as there should be, there's a lot of soul searching, a lot of kind of introspective time spent kind of thinking about what makes you worthy of leading, or how do you get to that point, because obviously coming out of school you're not there, so humility and being humble and trying to learn as you go, but still, I mean, the responsibility is still on you, I mean, so kind of getting that balance, it's difficult. It's difficult to achieve. And I think it probably, some people kind of do crack a little bit under that pressure, of not being able to really ever get it right or figure it out. And honestly, some of it's luck of the draw. If you get put into a unit right away where you've got good staff NCOs to look out for you, then you're going to have a lot easier time. You can kind of get mentored into the position. Whereas I had peers who I think, kind of got thrown right into the lines then to start. I mean, they got put into units where the staff NCOs, thought it was funny to break officers, and while I'm sure it is, it's not very productive for the process as a whole, right? So I mean, there's a lot of so experiences, just like everything else, experiences can vary. I was lucky; I didn't actually go to a regular unit to start. So I left as I was leaving engineer school. I was actually, and we were talking about this right before this started, but I was actually slated to go to the wing right away, right? So obviously as a combat engineer, you can come out, you can go to the logistics group, you can go to the wing, or you can go to division. Mm-hmm. And division's where everyone wants to go. But you don't get a chance, you don't get to choose. They just randomly assign you to wherever you're going to go. So I was originally supposed to go to the wing, and the wing unit that I was supposed to be going to was deployed at the time. They were doing, I think, like security at Al-Assad, basically. And so an IA bill that came up for a MIT team, for one of the military transition teams in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And before I'd even showed up to my unit, they'd already slotted me for that. Oh. So I basically went straight there. And so that team was, 11 guys, and it was all officers and staff NCOs. Uh-huh. So, I mean, a couple staff sergeants, a gunny, and then mostly captains and lieutenants, honestly. So it probably gave me a little bit of time there were a couple of pretty solid first lieutenants who were on the team, who took some time to kind of help me get ready for, while you're on the deployment, I learned a lot of lessons because we were going on missions and doing all the types of stuff that you need to do in the leadership role. Mm-hmm. But I was actually getting to experience them. I spent most of that year I spent in Iraq, we were advisors, but anytime we go on missions, since there was nobody else, we were either driving or gunning. So I spent a lot of my time gunning or driving a Humvee and kind of doing, kind of a lot of the more basic stuff. And I was, probably only a quarter of the time I was going out was I actually in charge of the mission. A lot of the other times I was just a guy driving a Humvee or sitting in a gun turret,
Yeah.
So that was actually a pretty good experience. And the two captains who were on the team had a lot of experience as well and spent some time kind of mentoring me. So, I got a little bit of an incubator, I think, ahead of actually stepping in front of Marines and being the guy who was in charge.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely was useful for me. So I didn't experience as much of that stress. It's a long circle back to what you asked in the first place. I didn't experience as much of that stress just because I had some time to kind of develop, and I'd actually been on missions and everything before I was stepping in front of a group of Marines and saying, hey, I'm in charge now. So it's a little bit easier. I mean, obviously it's not instant street cred or anything, but when you've got at least the campaign medal and, like at least they know you've done something.
Yeah. You
probably still don't know anything because you're still a lieutenant, but at least you're a lieutenant who's like, been someplace besides Quantico. So
now you sound like you went in with a very humble mindset, knowing that you have a learning curve and that there's room for learning. And, coming from the other side, I know for a fact that there are individuals that graduate from TBS and they come in with the complete opposite mindset. Do you think there's something behind coming in with that alpha machoism mentality? Do you think that there's a benefit?
I get what you're asking. There's obviously a reason why like generation after generation you have guys who come out that way, right? And so is there a survival mechanism behind that or something?
Or do those guys even last?
I mean, I think some of them do. It depends. There again, I mean, if you come in cocky, do you end up with a staff NCO who recognizes that you're young and kind of gives you a little bit of room to grow, but like keeps you from really messing up bad? Kind of gives you, because I have met staff NCOs who were like that, right? And as a captain, you kind of do some of that too, right? I mean, when I was a company commander, I used to just beat on my lieutenants. I was merciless with them, but at the same time, I also wanted to mentor them, make sure that I was beating on them because I cared about the Marines that were underneath them. And I didn't want them to screw up and get one of them killed. Yeah. So, I care more about their lives than I do the feelings of a lieutenant, right? So I would beat on them pretty mercilessly. So if you come in and you're hot-headed like that and you've got a guy who's willing to kind of nurture you and sort of give you, rudder corrections and let them think they're your ideas until he can kind of mold you into being a little bit more mature and at least channeling that aggression somewhere, then yeah, it could work. If you come in and you come into that batch of staff NCOs who think it's fun to break lieutenants, you're probably not going to make it very long.
Yeah.
Because they've got, those staff NCOs are going to have more street cred with your company commander than you will. So it's just, there's no way that fight works out well for you if you start clashing with them right away. Yeah. Because everyone else up the chain, both on the enlisted and officer side, is going to take the side of everyone else but the lieutenant. That's the way it works. Yeah. Like the captain's not going to probably defend the lieutenant and say, no, he's doing just fine. The staff NCOs need to change. No, as soon as there's a problem, the first person you're looking at as a company commander is the lieutenant. That's your automatic assumption for guilt is right there. It's just the way it works. It's a pretty cruel world, and you don't even realize how cruel it is until you've gotten up a little ways and you look back down to the lieutenants and you're like, man, those guys they got nobody but each other. And that's fine. It's probably, like I said, it's probably good. There's a lot of lessons to be learned in humility. And some of the bravado and a little bit of the cockiness is probably necessary, because if you come in too submissive, then you'll get walked all over as well.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a balance, right? It's that balance of being like, I'm in charge, so what I say goes, but I do want to hear what you have to say, and I trust the fact that you've got more experience, so work with me and I'll work with you. If you can establish that kind of rapport, just like rank aside, man to man, or woman to woman, or whatever, person to person, then to me that's kind of where the sweet spot is, right?
So going back to you saying that you were advising, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said that you were an advisor to the Afghan National Army. What does that entail?
So I actually did it in Iraq and Afghanistan. So the first one was in Iraq and then Afghanistan. So usually the way it works is, you're on a small team. So when I was in Iraq, we were 10 guys. Plus we had an Anglo team, a 4-man Anglo team attached to us. And we lived on an Iraqi army base. So it was COP H3, which was out kind of, I mean, it's probably, I'm not sure how familiar you are that far west in Iraq, but if you know where Korean Village was, it was kind of southwest of there, probably 25 miles from like the nearest coalition base. Mm-hmm. And we went there for a year, and you basically you're partnered with them. So you train them, you do classes, teach them. That's kind of up to you how much you want to mentor them or teach them. And then you mentor them through kind of the daily conduct of, being an armed force, and then go on missions with them, advise them through missions, help them drive their own intel. I mean, the whole point of it is to try to kind of start them off with training wheels and then pull the training wheels off and then slowly kind of step away.
Yeah.
So in Iraq, that was with an Iraqi infantry battalion. And spent a lot of time just kind of driving around with them looking for IED materials or whatever. So, by the time I got to Iraq, it was like 2008. 2008, 2009, it was not particularly kinetic in Iraq.
Yeah.
So a lot of that time was spent just kind of wandering the desert with these guys.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting experience. And then I did the same thing years later in Afghanistan as a captain. I had a team. And what we did was we went to their battalions are called Kandaks. So they have these special purpose Kandaks. They have like 4 infantry battalions, and then they'll have a 5th battalion that's a support battalion. And that battalion's made up of EOD, engineers, artillery, and recon. Mm-hmm. So I went over, I had a 15-man team that was kind of a mix of those types of MOSs, And same thing, except for just kind of in a more kinetic area. So we were going on missions with them, and there was probably a lot more learning on those missions than the ones we were doing in Iraq, right? Because they were actual missions, not just like, killing time missions.
Yeah. So at what point in your service were you like, okay, there's an end in sight?
So before I went over the last time to Afghanistan, so it would have been my 4th deployment overall. I was with 3rd CEB, and I was taking a division company over. And I was starting to get kind of burned out because in, basically 7 years I did, 4 deployments, which I'm sure tons of your listeners and probably tons of people you've had on the show have done more than that. But that's how many I did. That was exhausting,
Yeah.
So I was starting to get a little bit worn out, to be honest with you. And then the second thing, and this was actually more of a driving factor. So I'd been career designated. So with officers at some point before you pick up captain, you have to go before a board. And that board decides if you're going to be able to stay in. And then after that, it goes by promotion, right? But it's like this kind of decision point. So I'd made it past that. And then, it was probably a year or 2 off from being below zone for major. And I had not, and I can say this with all honesty, I never had any position that wasn't either on a team or leading Marines in that 7 years in the Marine Corps. I never spent a single day in an S shop.
Yeah.
I had 1 platoon, 2 companies, and 2 teams. And I'd spent all my time in the Marine Corps doing what I came to the Marine Corps to do, which was like lead Marines and go on deployments.
Yeah.
I'd foregone a B billet. You're usually supposed to do a fleet tour and then rotate to a B billet and then go back to the fleet, right, back and forth. And when I came due for orders the first time, I purposely waved off taking a D billet and said I wanted to stay with the fleet. And they said, well, it'll kind of screw up your career progression later on because you won't look well-rounded if all you've done has been in the fleet. And I at the time legitimately didn't care. Yeah. But I was coming up on the end of kind of like the fairy tale world I was living in. Like when I came back from Afghanistan, it was going to be, you're going to be the S3 Alpha. Like you're going to the op shop. And I mean, then what? You become a major, and when's your next leadership chance? Like lieutenant colonel? Yeah. I mean, if you get a battalion. So that the thought of doing that for like the next 10 years, it just looked just so depressing. So I just decided before I went out to Afghanistan the last time that I was going to come back, and before they could stick me in an S shop, I was going to, pull a parachute and say later, I'd done what I wanted to do in the Marine Corps, and I'd had a good time doing it. And somebody told me before I came in, stop before you hate it. That was like the biggest piece of advice. And this was from a gunny that I trusted quite a bit. I'm sorry, not before I came in, while I was in, before I got out. One of the gunnies I worked with, he said that. He was just like, you need to be able to tell when enough's enough. For some people, that's 20 years. Some people, that's 30 years. Some people, that's 4 yeyears. But know when it is and get out before you hate it, so you can always look back and love the Marine Corps. And I do. Yeah. I still do love the Marine Corps.
There's a
I didn't stay long enough to hate it.
Yeah, there was a master sergeant that I worked for early. He used to say, "Get out when it's not fun anymore."
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's the same idea,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
like I'm sure you've got some moto tats. I've got my evil globe and anchor on my chest, and the last thing I want to do is be brushing my teeth in the morning every day. Be like, oh my god,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
So I'm at a point where I'm still like, oh yeah, that was a cool time.
There was a Marine on a few months ago, and it's my best friend actually. And when he got out, he was one of those guys. He didn't want to wear boots. You couldn't say head in front of him, or hey, what military time. He'd long. Yeah, he'd break a clock if it had military time on it. Like, he was just that guy. Like, he was so disgruntled. And then he got in a motorcycle accident, and the VA had taken care of him, even though he hadn't signed up for to be enrolled in the VA at the time. And ever since that moment where he's like, hey, there is something behind this whole military fraternity kind of deal.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he's been on board. But yeah, like, there's so many people that get out and curse the heavens and get their tattoos covered up, and it's really funny because 20 years later they're proud to be the soldier, proud to be a Marine.
Yeah, they're wearing the veteran hat and walking through Walmart, making sure everybody sees it, right?
yeah. They're at Applebee's on Veterans Day.
Yep. Exactly. I know plenty of people who will be like that too. It's what it is, right? I mean, I'm happy with what I did.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be out right now. But still a beautiful chapter to look back on.
Of course,
not something I absolutely hate, but it was the right time for me. I mean, I could just tell it was the right time for me, and I didn't really deal with any. I know some people who get out and they go through like this like phase of like mourning where they can't quite tell if they're sad and they can't tell if they're happy, and they're gonna like grow a beard and smoke all the weed in the world, but they still wish they were in. They miss like getting up for some reason miss getting up at 5 every morning. I don't know, like they can't tell which way. Me, I was just like, no, I'm good. Like, time to start working and not have to be at formation.
So what was that process for you? You got burnt out, right? A lot. I mean, and that happens. You got burnt out. The thought of sitting in an S shop was beating you up. And so what did you do? How did you move from Captain Shultz to Mr. Schultz?
So first thing I did was, obviously I went, put in my papers, had a date. We were getting back. This is terrible planning on my part. We were getting back at the end of October, and I think I set my exit date for my birthday is November 30th. And I was like, I'm doing this birthday out of the Marine Corps. So I set my date for the 29th of November without thinking about any of the stuff that you have to do between getting back from deployment and all the post-deployment stuff. And then, I can't even remember the name of the class, but the class they make you sit through. Yeah, steps and taps. The class they make you sit through where they tell you that it's not too late to stay in the Marine Corps, and there's probably never going to be a job for you on the outside. This is how you sign up for, healthcare forever. I mean, so basically I came back, did that, rushed because I had all of this leave I wanted to use. I wanted to use as much of it as I could before I sold it back. And then, it was this frantic thing to get out. So I actually had to start looking for jobs when I was in Afghanistan. Still, at night I would do not much, but I was doing some LinkedIn searching or whatever. And
okay, so you're in Iraq. The second time was Afghanistan, right?
Afghanistan. Yeah. So this was number 3 for Afghanistan. I'm sitting out there as a company commander.
And at that point, because realistically, we would expect the officers to know about LinkedIn at that point. But how did you get in tune with that? Because I didn't know anything about it until I finally got out. Who taught you about all that?
Yeah. So there are recruiting companies that I'm sure you and some of your listeners have heard about, like the Lucas Group, Orion, Bradley Morris, and they keep records of when guys are getting out. So when my first round, when my time was up at 5 years, my Naval Academy commitment was up. I started getting calls from these guys asking me if I was going to get out, and so I developed relationships with a couple of them and just kind of stayed in touch with them because I figured at some point in time it'd probably be good to have them, And so I relied pretty heavily on another Naval Academy grad who was working for Lucas Group at the time. His name was Jim Lose. and I just was like, hey man, like I'm on a short timeline. Like, what do I need to do? And he was like, well, here's a template for a resume. Send it back to me when you're done with it, and I'll take a look at it for you. Post it on your LinkedIn. You can get there at the time, LinkedIn, and I think they still do it. You could get something like 5 years of premium access to LinkedIn if you just sent them a message and said that you were a veteran.
Yeah, it's a year now.
To verify it somehow or another. Yeah. And so you could put like a job seeker badge on your profile. I don't know if they still do it this way, but at the time you could put a job seeker badge on your profile. So it would show up to everybody that you were looking for a job. So between that and, talking to the guy from Bradley Morris as well, I kind of just started prepping as best as I could. I ordered a book while I was out there and had it delivered. It was called like the 100 Toughest Interview Questions or something. Read that, did my resume, did some LinkedIn shuffling around, and then kind of just crossed my fingers and waited till I got back. That was kind of it. And then when I got back, I was kind of so exhausted. I was like, well, I've got some terminal leave. So until that terminal leave is over, I'm not doing anything. But then, you kind of start getting calls from the recruiter saying, hey, there's some job opportunities you might want to take a look at. They might not be around forever. And so I did, and I actually started working before a terminal leave was up.
Oh,
maybe the way I had the date set, I'm saying this now, I'm doing the math. I think the way I had the date set was if I didn't go on terminal leave by November 29th, I was going to lose days.
Yeah.
I think that's how it was. I took 60 days of terminal leave. I don't think it expired until the end of January.
Gotcha.
So I actually started this job before that leave was up. I started in January of 2014. I was expecting to just not even start the search until the leave was up because I had some money saved up, but then, kind of just went for it. So,
yeah. Well, So Lucas Group, I know there's two separate sides for Lucas Group and Orion, both, right? They have departments for both officer and enlisted. When I was using them, they would invite us out for the weekend, right? We'd come on either a Friday or a Saturday and they'd go over the resume and then interview prep. Mm-hmm. And then the next day you're lined up with 4 to 6 interviews. Is it the same on the officer side, or is it more intimate?
It's both, the short answer. So the job I'm working at right now was the first place I interviewed.
Must be nice.
And then after that, well, I mean, so they interviewed me, and then there was like the process got started, right? So there was multiple steps. Well, then I was already in the slot. I was already working, so they kind of just, or not working, but I was already starting the job search and everything. Mm-hmm. So then they talked me into going to some job fairs, and then from there I had some follow on stuff. So they kind of did both, right? They had the job fairs where you would get 6 or 7 interviews in a day. Mm-hmm. And then they also were calling me specifically with opportunities. So I did both, and it was one of like I said, it was the first one, which was kind of a personalized conversation that I ended up going with.
Let me ask this. Now you're about to get out. You've made the decision. Terminal leave's coming up. Lucas Group starts contacting you, and that's kind of exciting, right? Getting out, and you're like, oh, there's this job opportunity. Let me ask, in hindsight, now, I don't want your company listening and saying, oh, is that right? But in hindsight, would you have taken the same job, or do you feel like you were taking it because it was the first job offered? Does that make sense?
So I took it because it was the first job offered.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I was still taking it again because I wasn't educated enough to realize really how good of an opportunity it was.
Yeah.
So I would do it again, but I mean, a lot of it was just like, hey, I feel like, I should go for this. But that said, I could have held out a little bit longer. I was getting, who knows if I would have gotten them or not, but I was moving along with a couple other companies. So it wasn't really a terror-based decision. It was actually more that I'd been told that this was a really good opportunity.
Gotcha.
And I wasn't 100% sure that it was the right opportunity for me, but I was willing to take a chance on it because from what I could understand, it was a really good opportunity. So, I mean, it was kind of a little bit of a mix of both. I wasn't scared into taking a job, but I definitely was afraid of missing an opportunity that would be really good. So I kind of just told myself, well, give it a try. I really don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of reach the end of the road and you're like, well, now what do I want to be when I grow up? Mm-hmm. Like I knew from the time I was a kid what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end of that and you're like, well, now what?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't,
With that process,
there's no natural transition for a ground guy, right? Like it's not like a pilot where you're like, well, I'm going to go fly for the airlines, or I was a doctor in the military, so I'm going to be a doctor in the real. No, it's like, like finding landmines and demolitions was my thing. There's not a lot of that in California, so
what? You know? So with that kind of mindset, right? Again, going through that process now in your mind, what do you think that you could have done differently? Or like if somebody's going through that process right now, what would you tell them? Like, hey, make sure blank.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things. Number one, don't shortchange the skills you have, because it's not just what your MOS was, right? Like if you're an infantryman, it's not just I can shoot guns and kill people. If you're an engineer, it's not just blow things up and build a bridge. Like there are underlying skill sets that went along with whatever your specific experience was, right? So, I mean, if you have any time as an NCO, you have leadership experience, public speaking. You have, I mean, there's a number of things that you can extract from your experience. And instead of being so rigid about like, no, I did this in the military, like understand how to massage out like the true value. Because at the end of the day, your employer doesn't really care, like, you know, how many confirmed kills you have or how many times you jumped out of an airplane, unless you're like interviewing with Blackwater, right? Like if you're going for a desk job or a corporate job, then understand what it is that they're looking for, figure out what it is that you've got, and then put it into their vocabulary so that they can understand it, so they're not looking at you. I think sometimes we have a little bit of, and I do the same thing myself, or have done it in the past. We take a little bit of pride in being like very different, right? And like every once in a while dropping terms that people don't understand, and you know, like we have our own speak, right? I mean, there's a lot of military guys that work at my work. Every once in a while, I can tell that either me or them, we're dropping terms just because we know it confuses some of the non-military people around us, and it's an inside joke. Yeah. That's not funny on a resume because they don't care. I mean, they don't, most of the time they don't care enough to try to decipher like how many times you were, I don't know. Yeah. Insert military jargon here, right? Yeah. Like how many times you dropped into the LZ. So what does that mean? Well, I can deliver supplies on time. Yeah. You know, I've done supply chain management, right? Like, I mean, it's whatever it is that it needs to be for them. And massaging that out is definitely, I think, a huge thing. And the other thing is you have a right to get a feel for where they want you to work. So I ended up taking a corporate sales job, and I had some serious concerns about sales in general, right? And so before I accepted this offer, they gave me the offer, and they wanted me to join before their sales kickoff. You know, my company every year has a sales kickoff where all of the U.S. team gets together, and there's some training, and there's some having dinner and social stuff and everything. And so rather than, you know, they wanted me to attend this, but they wanted me to attend it as an employee. So what I told them was, I'll attend it, but I will not sign anything until I've attended it and I've gotten a feel for what the company culture is like, what I'm stepping into, what I'm committing to here, you know? And they took it really well. I mean, and it's in their best interest, right? To make sure that whoever they bring on board is a good cultural fit and a good, you know, good personality, you know, kind of a kindred spirit for what they're trying to get done. Yeah. So I would recommend that to people, you know, on the flip side, I'm at a point where I'm interviewing people, you know, because I've hired a couple of people for, you know, to work underneath me. If you're going to do that, then don't be wishy-washy if you're going to make those demands. Like, it's got to be an if-then statement. If I come to this and I like it, then I'm going to be a part of your company, not just like, well, I'd like to cruise by and see what's up, you know, but you should, before you make your final decision, you know, get more information and get a feel for what it is you're actually going to be doing and who you're going to be working with. So you know?
What did Lucas Group end up planting you into?
So I work really, I guess to take away the glorified titles of this, I'm a software salesman, business-to-business software sales, which is actually a pretty good business to be in. You don't realize it's one of those. There's all these hidden jewels out in the real world, right? And this is one of them. It's actually a pretty good line of work to be in. There's a good progression path, and it pays pretty good. Yeah. Yeah. So I do basically engineering software. It's mostly business to business sales. So, you know, maybe aerospace and defense companies or automotive manufacturers, or kind of fill in the blanks. Anybody who's doing really anything with like computer aided engineering probably has a place for what I do.
So how did which is okay. I get caught up on my words.
So you're good.
What I want to get at is, you were saying earlier, don't shortchange your skills, right? And so Here you are, a 7-year combat engineer captain, 4 tours out there driving Humvees, lighting things up and teaching Afghanis and Iraqis how to protect themselves. And then Lucas Group reaches out. They ask you to fill in this template, right? And then, and then you fall into account managing, right? Or software sales.
Right.
And can you, because I actually just drove into the house today from Google. They had a veterans workshop for resume writing, and their whole process was to pull out those moments, just like you were saying, like the public speaking and supply chain management, stuff like that, from being a chow hall worker, right? So what was it about combat engineering that you pulled to get into the job you're at today? Because they're 2 totally different worlds.
Yeah. So one of the biggest questions is coming into sales is people want to know, like, well, if you've never done sales before, how can you do sales? And so one of the examples I gave, not only my company, but a couple others, was, well, I actually have already kind of done the most difficult kind of sale there is. And to explain that, as a combat advisor, I had no direct tasking authority over the people I was working with, right? So the Afghans that I was advising, I couldn't tell them to do anything. I'm just there as a combat advisor. Now, obviously, there's things that I'm getting pushed from the Marine Corps side, from higher, that's saying, hey, they need to do this, they need to do that. But at the end of the day, I couldn't tell them to do anything. So what I'd have to do is convince them or make them think it was their own idea. And they would have to come to that conclusion themselves, whether they were going to be convinced by me and do what I wanted them to do because I asked them to, or whether it was me planting the seed and then letting it grow and then them doing it themselves without them realizing they'd been manipulated. Either way, I was getting somebody to do that I had no power over their actions to do something I wanted them to do. Mm-hmm. And I did it across a language barrier and sometimes while getting shot at. Yeah. So, I mean, if that's not sales, I don't know what is, I mean, at the end of the day. So, you could, from that time, I could focus on, like, wow, I'm, proficient in not only U.S. weapons, but Soviet-made weapons. And I can, this, that, whatever you want to say. Yeah. But a sales organization doesn't care if people break down an AK-47 and then teach an, Afghan soldier how to use it. But the ability to, break down language barriers, use negotiations, convince people of what they want to do. I mean, that is sales, right? Yeah. So it's that type of stuff, right? It's extracting those bits. I mean, I've led people. That's something that, you can say that and without having to be like, teams, platoons, companies. I mean, I've led this many people at this time, this many people at this time, I mean, there's a lot of ways to simplify it and then pull out the parts that are, as unglamorous as it is. I mean, what's one of the biggest things that you can put if you've been in any kind of leadership position? And it's not something that anybody brags about, but you were probably signing for gear or had some sort of, was it T&E or whatever it was, your equipment list, right, that you had to keep track of. Mm-hmm. How much was that worth? Yeah. And round it up a little bit. And you were in charge of that much gear. Yeah. Most people in the civilian world aren't in charge of that kind of gear or any significant number of people or anything like that. Yeah. So if you have a fire team and their weapons, you were in charge of, 3 people and X amount of dollars of military gear that you had to maintain and report on and keep track of, I mean, that's all like real world skill stuff.
And did Lucas Group help you pull that stuff out, or was there a mentor in the service helping you at the same time, like a career counselor?
No, honestly, it was mostly through Lucas Group or friends that I had who had transitioned out. I didn't, and this is probably my bad for not really exploring the options enough. I was kind of at a point where it didn't seem like there was much help I was getting from inside Marine Corps, the organization. So I sort of just looked outboard, and part of that was probably I was kind of done with the Marine Corps, so I was looking elsewhere for help as well. But yeah, most of my help came from outside of the Marine Corps.
Okay. One last question about the Marine Corps. I'm curious because I'm curious on the O side. I've heard on the enlisted side that when individuals have declared that they're going to get out, right? They said, okay, 8 years, I'm done. What happens is that their shops start to kind of give them the cold shoulder, and they've kind of already written them off as deserters or just
Traitors.
Yeah, traitors.
Yeah.
Do you guys experience that on the O side as well?
So yes and no. I honestly feel like I kept it, as a company commander, you keep a lot of things kind of to yourself, right?
Of course.
So my guys knew, my XO company gunny and first sergeant, well, I'm still friends with all those guys. They all knew that I was getting out, but I kind of kept it from my Marines just because it wasn't pertinent to what they were doing. And I just didn't really put my personal stuff out for them for display. But I feel like after they found out, because eventually they did, I feel like it almost gave me more credibility with them. Because a lot of them were like, one-term guys. And so I think it kind of had some humanity in their eyes that you're not like a lifelong officer robot in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
But on the officer side, there was you could definitely tell, especially not really from my peer group so much, because a lot of the captains and lieutenants, I mean, that's where most people leave. If there was a captain or a lieutenant, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of them were at least considering leaving at some point in time. But from like the rank of major up, there was a lot of.
Isn't that strange?
Every time you tell somebody, well, why are you getting out? Well, do you really want to know, or are you just upset because you're in and I'm getting out? I mean, it's like, I'm not making the same choices. I mean, to the point that like, I started realizing I'd made, and this is probably part of the reason why I didn't look within the Marine Corps for help. I realized I'd made a timing mistake, a critical timing error as far as, setting basically the day I was going to be leaving active service for 30 days after I got back from Afghanistan. And so I asked my XO, my battalion XO, who's a major, to please help me out if there was a way that we could just get like a 30-day extension or something that would be helpful. And I mean, he just kind of blew it off, finally told me they'd said no. And then when I went in and checked myself with admin, he'd never even sent a request. I was of no use to him anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. We were towards the end of the deployment. They'd gotten what they needed out of me, and that was kind of it, So,
yeah,
it is what it is, but
yeah, it's just super strange that, cause I did not experience that at all because, I got out not on my own terms. So, yeah, having that moment where it's like, hey guys, I'm not going to reenlist. I didn't have that option. So, right. I never experienced that, but I hear it all the time, especially from the enlisted guys. And I've never asked an officer if that's the same. So it's weird. It's just a weird mindset to start to shun your own brothers and sisters because they've had enough.
It's strange, and I always kind of wrote it off too. And this is obviously no insult whatsoever to people who made a career out of it, because there were also people who, Marine majors and lieutenant colonels who were very cool about it and were like, hey, good luck with whatever you do.
Of course.
I think some of them are a little bit bitter because they made the choice to stay, and maybe they're regretting it. So they somehow or another, it like pisses them off to see people get out.
Well, if you re-up, they could have gotten out the S shop. So that's probably what happened.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So, yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Something else, so they could go to another, they could go to another staff thing. Like, you're a major, man. There's no leadership positions for majors.
So you moved from sales, obviously. Now you've transitioned within your company. Mm-hmm. What's that process like? When I had to ask for a raise, I had to ask a civilian the process. So how did you transition within the company? Like, did you already know the process? Did you have to ask around? Like, because this is a new field for us, right? Our first job.
Yeah, it's a common point of frustration, especially from the Marines that I work with. Is the fact that career progression is not outlined in the civilian world the way it is in the military. Like, you have a pretty good idea of what your goals are, where you need to be, what a reasonable time is to get there, all that type of stuff. And that's just not apparent so much in the civilian world. So to take it back a step and kind of give you an idea of the environment in which I work, the VP of sales for North America is actually a Naval Academy grad and a Marine. And most of the account managers, so most of the guys in the role that I came into, I'd say probably 80% of our company is former captains from the military, like almost 80% of our sales force. So you're looking at probably 20-ish guys who are all, and at one point in time, it was all Marine ground, Army ground, like captains, right? Now we have some Air Force and Navy guys in there too, but, So there's a lot of military where I work, especially on the sales side.
Gotcha.
So to some degree, they kind of all know that the leadership at least kind of has an understanding from the VP who kind of translates it for them that we have an expectation of where we're going to go in our careers. Mm-hmm. So I approached our VP, it would have been about a year and a half ago, and just said to him, hey, listen, I'm getting offers from other companies, and some of them seem to have kind of clearly defined routes to leadership, ways to progress in your business. And I don't know that I can see that here. So I need to feel, I need to have basically a roadmap outline for me. And I need to know that there's progression if I work hard enough for it. Mm-hmm. And he was completely on board with that. So I told him what I wanted, and that was to be, a mid-level manager sometime around this time. Mm-hmm. And I guess it would have been last October. He basically said, hey, I remember the conversation we had. I'm creating a spot for you, and it's yours if you want it still. So, that was kind of how it worked. It was a very frank and honest conversation with him where you can only play that card a couple times, right? Yeah. Where you're kind of like, this is what it takes to keep me at the company. Yeah. And I guess that's a good chance to see if you're worth keeping to them as well. Because if he's like, oh, that's nice to know, right? And kind of moves the conversation along, that, you probably should be looking elsewhere anyway. Yeah. But yeah, it's just an earnest conversation. I think that's probably your best bet, and explaining why it is that for them, they know that my goal is ultimately to be a CEO of a company.
I found that to be true in my first job out, where I was very open to saying how I felt about something or talking about my stance on a idea at the company. And who was I? I was just a worker bee at the time, right? But having that confidence and that ability to approach my management set me apart from the other quote unquote worker bees. But I could tell that they respected that, right? And so I tell people, this isn't the military anymore. Chain of commands is approachable, and no necessarily doesn't mean no.
No, it really doesn't. And have an idea. Be ambitious, but be realistic. Yeah. I didn't go to him and tell him I want to be the VP next year. What I was asking for was a reasonable move in career, and I work hard. I work hard for them. Yeah. They know that, Yeah. So, and if they don't know that, then there again, it's probably time for me to look somewhere else. Yeah. Because they don't see it now at an appropriate time. You got to put your dues in. I can't just go to them first week and be like, hey, I'm a veteran. I've been to war for this country, and I think I should probably get a raise. Obviously it doesn't work that way.
Don't you know who I am? I'm a hero.
Advantages. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, there's advantages, and experiences that you have, but some, on some levels, you're also starting from square one again. You're proving yourself in the corporate world, Yeah.
So speaking of that, I sent out a questionnaire, right, with some questions on it. And on the very last page, there was a picture of a screenshot. Did you get a chance to see that? Because if not, I'll just read it out. I'm going to read it out regardless because there's people listening and they can't see it. So
I could pull it up, but I have not read it. No, go ahead.
Yeah. So as you're pulling it up, I'll read it. Now the whole thing is, I saw this screenshot one day. And it infuriates me because, it's a screenshot from an HR or a recruiter, section of a business, or maybe even a recruiting firm or whatnot, but it's got two columns, and one says officers, one says enlisted. And at the top it says, because of the differences in education and military work experience, there should be different recruiting and branding strategies for officers and enlisted vets. And on the officers, it says, bullet points, right? Generally, officers will be better suited for leadership, strategy, planning, or analytical roles. Officer recruiting should focus on military alum, check, blah, blah, blah. And enlisted, generally enlisted members will be better suited for operational or tactical roles. Enlisted recruiting should focus on high-frequency roles such as call center or similar operational roles. Now, you don't have to butter my bread or I'm a big boy, but it doesn't split enlisted.
It doesn't differentiate at all.
Yeah. It just puts two totally different categories. Now, being a proud enlisted, I will say that, sergeants are the backbone of the Marine Corps. So,
well, obviously.
Yeah. No, but
right behind captain.
So, but like all like shits and giggles aside, and you know, all feelings aside, do you find there to be a little truth in this, or do you think that, you know, this should be revisited, or because can enlisted?
Okay. I mean, I think it's awful. But go ahead.
No, can enlisted fall into the same role that you stepped into right out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for starters, I mean, my role is not really. I mean, I'm in a leadership role now, but when I first started, I mean, it was more about interpersonal skills, being able to, you know, keep to a pretty rigorous schedule and be self-motivated and self-driving. And I mean, that's qualities that you could find in an enlisted person or not find in an officer pretty easily, right? I mean, it could go. We have certainly hired people who are former officers here who did not work out, you know. Yeah. And I could name tons of people who I worked with in the Marine Corps who were not officers that I think would have been excellent candidates. So I think this is an oversimplification by, you know, a huge stretch, because I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I lead a team of three account managers fall under me right now. So 3 sales guys, basically. And all of them were former military. They were all at least captains when they got out of the military. And it is completely different than leading Marines is. I mean, it's completely, it's a totally different challenge, taking all kinds of different. And so I've built upon skills I've learned in the Marine Corps, but having been a platoon commander or a company commander doesn't make me like automatically fit for this job. It just means that I've got some tools in my toolkit that I can learn or leverage as I learn this role better. Yeah. But it's not an instant guarantee. And I don't think it would be having not been a commissioned officer, I don't think it would be a death sentence in this role. If you know how to interact with people, and you would have come up as a sales guy anyway. So, you would have the common background. I don't think, I just don't see the differentiation. Go ahead.
So you're hiring now, right? You just said that you've been given the go ahead to hire your own team, and now you've got 3 individuals working under you. What are you looking for in an employee, especially a vet employee?
I mean, first and foremost, I'm looking for somebody who can understand and interact with people, who has people skills, which can be hit or miss, honestly, coming out of the military sometimes. I mean, there's just, yeah. I mean, we'll leave it at that. You understand. There are some people who come out of the Marine Corps specifically who think that yelling is the only way to really get a point across.
I don't believe it.
And yeah, right. So some form of interpersonal skills is probably number one. But I mean, really, in this role, an account manager, most of us, if we're not traveling, we set our own travel schedules. Okay. And if we're not traveling, most of us work from home when we're not traveling. I mean, if I'm not, I'm only a couple miles from our corporate headquarters. If I'm not sure, I work from home today because I wasn't traveling. But at the end of the day, I have a quota that I have to fulfill. My team has a quota they have to fulfill. However we get there, it's like the truest form of like big boy rules, right? Where like, nobody's going to check up on you from day to day, but I expect you to be, to perform and to have what you need done when the time comes. Yeah. So I mean, somebody who's, I'm looking for somebody who's got those, honesty above everything else. And then the ability to self-motivate even when it's not fun, even when it gets old, even when sales are falling through, even when you don't feel like it, even when you're working from home and the TV's right there and you could very easily just kind of take the day off. And I would have no way of knowing because I'm not checking on you. I don't care what you're doing today.
Of course.
I care about you making your number at the end of the quarter. That's it, So, discipline, and probably one of the reasons that, one of the biggest reasons I think they hired former officers and former military here is that they trust us to do what we say we're going to do, to be honest, to manage our time, to be self-motivated, to be disciplined. Most of us, a lot of software companies will only really hire people who have software backgrounds. It's actually to be a relatively difficult industry to break into on the sales side. This company does not. It hires people who have zero sales background, not just zero software sales background, but zero sales background in the form of military candidates. And they do that because they know that what we lack in specific skills of this job, we make up for in all the other skills we bring to the table. So I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who can not give me excuses, who can get out there and when it sucks, keep pushing. And so generally speaking, former military fits that mold.
So were there any other transition lessons or snags that you ran into while you were getting out? And
yeah, I mean, definitely. I think like the biggest one that kind of probably encompasses most of the rest of the lessons that I learned is don't be afraid. I feel like the Marine Corps, at least the Marine Corps specifically, paints this really bleak picture of like life on the outside. Like there's nobody to take care of you. You're ugly. Everyone's going to hate you. Yeah. They're probably not going to give you a job. And
Jody's got your girl.
Yeah, Jody's got your girl. You're going to be given hand jobs for crack, and you're just not. There's no place for you out in society. And you said it was okay to cuss on this, right?
Yeah.
Made a really lewd reference. All right. So you walk out of Steps and Taps, and you're like, what did I just do? Like, I have no idea where I'm going to go in life, right? Yeah. Like, and it's terrifying. I don't know if it's like this. It's I always like tell people it's like leaving the Marine Corps is like leaving an abusive relationship, right? They just beat the crap out of you. And if you try to leave, they're like, no, wait. Signing bonus, come back. Like, I love you. You can go to airborne school. Like, let's talk about this. And then if you're like, no, I'm leaving for real. Then they're like, fine, you're ugly. Nobody's ever going to love you. Yeah. I mean, it's just not like, it's like a mind game,
Yeah.
And so I was so freaked out leaving the military, and that should have been like one of the most stress-free, happy times of my life.
Yeah.
Because I was done, and if I had it to do over again, I'd go back and tell that, that whatever, how old I was, guy sitting in class, like, just chill, man. Like it's going to be okay. Like you're probably not going to be living in a tarp behind Walmart. You'll probably find a job, and like the economy's not that bad. Like things will be okay. So that would have been number one. Is just like don't be afraid. Just enjoy it. You've earned it. Like you're no matter what your service looked like. At the end of the day, you served your country honorably, and you're getting out. You've got that chance to like go do another chapter. And then. It worked out well for me in the position that I was in, or that I'm in right now. I mean, I would not have chosen differently, but I do feel as though I allowed myself to rush in making the decision as far as what I wanted to do when I got out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you can't float around for like 6 months, like kind of just, looking up at the sky and saying, who am I? But
yeah.
And there again, also don't take it too seriously, because I think it's okay to have a couple of kind of like testing directions coming out of the military.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like a job hopper who like changes his vision and goal and direction in life every 6 months. But I think it's okay to like make a transition, if you don't like what you're doing,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's part of the reason why I took the sales job. I wasn't sure I wanted to do sales. In fact, when I first started getting out, I knew I didn't want to do sales, and I kind of got talked into it. Somebody sold me on it. And, my point of view on the whole thing was like, well, listen, and somebody actually told me this. Like, if you decide to leave sales and you go to interview for another job and you tell them, hey, I tried sales, it just wasn't for me, whoever's sitting on the other end of the desk is probably going to say, yeah, I don't like sales either. I mean, so it's an understandable thing to like give something a try. It doesn't work out and you go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But you're never really going to know unless I can only really speak for Marine Corps. But I mean, there's a very serious fear of failure that gets put into you, and with good reason, because the implications of failing in the Marine Corps is measured in lives. Most things aren't that serious in the corporate world.
Of course.
Like it's okay to try something and fail. Probably shouldn't set yourself up to do that on a regular basis, because then you start to set patterns, but, be bold. Like if you've got a vision for what you want to do, don't let Steps and Taps scare you into thinking that it's the road to ruin. Like just give it a try. And then if it doesn't work out, there are other jobs. You've got a skill set. You've got a head, a foot up on the rest of the world who hasn't done what we've done, and as long as you can leverage that wisely, then I think it's an advantage you can definitely play.
What would you tell vets who are struggling to find themselves today?
What I would tell them is, I guess one of the things I've kind of had to remind myself is don't try to replicate the past. Like my time in the Marine Corps was awesome, and I still have some of the same friends from then, and it's nothing but good memories, but I am not trying to recreate that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a different chapter of my life, and it's cool because I work around a lot of military, and so I kind of get to preserve part of that. But you got out for a reason. Don't over romanticize it in the rearview mirror, Like if anytime I'm starting to like wonder if I made the right choice, every once in a while I just think about like what it's like to wake up in the field, in the rain, muddy, and somebody's yelling at you. Yeah. And oh, by the way, you've been there since 2 a.m. because the armory opens at 6, and so God knows that you've got to be like lined up at 2 so that at first light you can be out in the field because God forbid you miss 15 minutes of the forest. So like you gotta like remind yourself from time to time there was a reason why you got out. There are awful things that you have to deal with in the military. There were great things as well, but just remember why you got out, and don't try to keep living in the past and recreating it. The cool thing is you've got that now. That's your experience. Nobody can ever take that away from you. Yeah. So now try to figure out what your next experience is. What's the next thing you want to do? What's the next thing that you'll be proud telling people you did? And the Marine Corps will probably always be the proudest thing I've ever done. Like, I mean, no denying it. I love the Marine Corps. I'm really glad that and honored that I got to do it, but it's not the end of my story, and I'm not going to let it be,
Yeah. You'll have prouder moments, I promise. Like, believe me, I mean, 10 years in, and I didn't want to get out. I love the Marine Corps, so I know exactly what you're saying, but like, I'm telling you, like, we have a 3-year-old little baby Jake, and man, there's something about being a father that, like, we took him to Reno this weekend to be with us while I was receiving my award, and him shaking hands with World War II vets, Iwo Jima survivors, and like 88-year-old Korean War vets saluting my son. I mean, that was super duper cool. You know what I mean? So there's going to be those moments, like, but I understand what you're saying. Like, hold on to those in the best forms possible, because we all went through the same bullshit where we woke up cold and hungry and we're just mad and duty on holidays and waking up at 3 to go pull somebody out of ultimately not having, you've only got so much control over the direction your life takes. Of course. Well, now you've got that full control. I mean, use it. It's probably one of the things, if you're like me, it's probably one of the things you were bitching about when you were in was, I don't control my destiny. I'm at the whim of the organization, and I'll go where it says to go, when it says to go there, Yeah. And now I've got control. I've got the wheel. So like, I mean, if I'm not gonna take advantage of it, then it was kind of for nothing. Then I should just stayed in, So what would be the best advice that you have? The one piece of advice that you have for transitioning service members?
The one piece.
Just one.
I would say don't be, that's tough. I guess the piece of advice would be this. You have more in your skill set than you probably realize. And don't be afraid to figure out how to pull that out and really advertise and sell yourself. Everybody else is, and I know, humility and being humble is a good thing. And I'm not saying give that up, but don't be afraid to go in there and find the amazing things that you've done as a service member, whether that was 4 years, never deployed, 20 years, fought in World War II. I mean, everybody's got something that they did that was pretty amazing. It's just the fact that you signed up to defend your nation in whatever manner that you did that in. I mean, to me, that's pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a reason why people admire veterans, and you picked up skills. Don't be afraid to share those with people and get out there and network. Let people know who you are and what you have to bring, and that you're ready to be successful. Yeah.
So the last thing about the military. So if you can go back and tell Recruit Shultz one thing, what would it be? Or Cadet Shultz, right?
Midshipman Shultz. I mean, at that stage of my life, I would have told him to put down the bottle and get serious. But about like overarching. How else are you supposed to learn your limits? Duh. Yeah, exactly. If you never go past them, right? You never know the edge of the map until you've driven your ship right over the side. I guess I would probably tell him that failure is always better than regret. Yeah. Always. That's awesome. Yeah. Do you have a story behind that, or? No, you know, I just think that there were probably, I don't know, there were probably paths I could have taken differently. And, you know, I thought that being a combat engineer was something I wanted to be, and it worked out well for me because of the deployments I got. Mostly because I got to be a combat advisor so much, but honestly, I you know, kind of wish I'd thrown my hat in the ring to be an infantry officer. They usually get better assignments. I mean, there's things like that, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, I mean, just any of the tougher, any time that you take a tougher path than the one that I can't tell you that I would have made it through any other path but the one that I made it through. You know, I always love when you talk to people who are like, well, I could have gone to Buds and made it through, but I chose not to because this isn't. You can't say that because you didn't go to Buds. So whether there was a reason behind you making that choice or not, like you haven't done it, so you can never speculate as to whether or not you could have made it. So the only level of difficulty that I know that I could make it through is the one that I did. And there are times when there were other paths that were open up, and for whatever reason I made the choices I made, and I'm happy I am where I am. But yeah, I mean, maybe, who knows? Maybe I would have done things differently. Yeah. You never know.
And you'll never know. Yeah. So
I never will. There's, like I said, there's no
never
way to
ever
extrapolate whether I would have passed certain things or made it through certain things. It's all speculation at this point in time.
Are there any other topics that you want to hit before we start wrapping it up? Like, are there any bullet points or maybe something that is near and dear to your heart that you want to mention?
I think the one last thing that I would say on that line is, you know, while my kind of piece of advice was market yourself and get out there and be proud of what you've done, on the flip side, like, don't be that guy. And like, I feel like I'm seeing more and more of them. I feel like there is a segment of our veteran brethren who spend a lot of time reminding everyone nonstop that they are veterans. And it's not to like better the veteran community. It's simply to like get attention or get free drinks or something. So I would say just don't be that guy, you know, to anybody who's considering getting out and like, you know, stocking up on their extra medium affliction shirts so they can go hang out and tell people how badass they used to be. Like, you know, just be cool about it, right? Like, don't make us all look bad, because there's a lot of people. I mean, you know, people like you who are out there spreading the good news about what you can do and how good it is to hire veterans and the value of being a veteran and all this stuff. Don't undermine that work by being the guy who like people don't want to be around and they associate, because for most people, they're going to know like one veteran, right? So you're kind of an ambassador. You're the ambassador of it, out there as a veteran, right? So if you're the one tool bag that they know who's a veteran, I mean, it just sours the pool for all the rest of us, you know. And the same thing goes for job performance. Like if you're gonna get a job and throw out that you're a veteran a lot to get a job, and hey, no shame in that game. That's what I did to get my job. But then you got to perform when you get there. Otherwise, the next time a veteran comes in with his resume, they're going to be like, oh yeah, these guys, you know, they really loved, you know, tell us all about the things they did in the military. And then now they last about 3 weeks and then they're gone, you know, so just don't be that guy. That'd be my, or girl.
That's good advice. Yeah, 'cause we all know that guy. We all know that guy.
We do.
Yeah, we all
know that guy. I know multiple of those guys.
You know, to clear it up for anybody listening, like, Leland's really not being derogatory in the mindset, because anybody listening, any vet knows there's just that guy. There's that guy. Yeah. That guy that even vets don't want to be around. So. Yeah. No,
the comment is not directed towards 99.9% of veterans. It's to the one guy who's constantly got to be reminding everybody that he's a veteran, and that
it's funny because every other service
betterment.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny because every other service, their go-to joke is, "How do you know if somebody's a Marine?" Don't worry, they'll tell you.
They'll tell you, right? Yeah. And there's even not any issue with telling. It's the way you tell, right? Like if you're the person who like everybody cringes when they start to talk about all the time they spent in Kuwait or whatever, you know, just it's that person, right? Who just can find a way to rub everyone wrong, and they're, you know, and hopefully it did not come off as derogatory at all to anybody, because it's not meant to be unless you're that guy, you know.
It's if the shoe fits, right? For a lot of us at school, it's the Okinawa Marines, because we always do when I was in Okinawa, so it's always the Okinawa story. When I was in Okinawa, so
right,
that's the running joke.
I mean, that's okay. It's just the person who's out there just rubbing everyone the wrong way. You know, you make a bad name for all of us.
So, Leland, I am sincerely grateful for you taking time out of your day today to have this conversation with me and share your story and your transition and your guidance and knowledge and power with the vets that will either become veterans soon or already living the life and kind of looking for something to fill a gap in their soul, so to say, right? So I do appreciate you taking that time out and giving back to the vets out there right now. It means a lot to all of us.
Well, and thank you. Seriously. I appreciate you taking time to speak with me. Hopefully it was of value to anybody who's listening out there. And congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
And thank you, because you do a lot for the veteran community, and it's a lot of people benefit from it, and I think that's a really, really amazing thing that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate it. I do, wholeheartedly. I'm starting to learn how to say thank you because I'm pretty, I'm overly humble sometimes, so. But
it's
not on
one
purpose.
of the hardest things, right?
Yeah.
It's how I would say thank you. On Veterans Day when people were like, "Hey, thanks for your service."
Oh, I hate.
For a long time, I couldn't figure out how to answer that.
Right?
Yeah.
You're welcome.
What do you say?
Yeah. Thank you for thanking me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, exactly.
So this has been an episode of You're the Vet. Thank you for tuning back in, or if this is your first time tuning in, thank you for checking it out the first time in. Leland and I want to say thank you and have a good evening or good morning or whatever time of the day it is. And check back in next week for the next episode of You're the Vet. Bye.